It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. Thank you for joining us. Phil DeLuca is here today. Phil is a psychotherapist disruptor, relationship healer, author, speaker, and guinea pig, according to his bio. Phil has helped many couples save and reignite their relationships with a completely different approach to therapy that pretty much goes against all of the old accepted methods that most of us grew up with, which are actually now cliche terms in our language. For example, get it off your chest, talk it out, don't go to bed angry, just to name a few. He will tell us about his trademark untalk method, and I was really intrigued by this, and have to say that I actually learned a few things that should help me the next time I feel like I'm slipping into my lizard brain mode. And if you don't know what lizard brain mode is, stay tuned and listen to the interview for a complete explanation of it. It was a full show, so we don't have a lot of time, but one quick announcement: September 4th, our Labor Day show, we're going to be featuring 12 tracks from 12 indie music artists, again from World Arts Music, and we're very excited to be featuring these artists on the show. We did one a few months ago, and it was a good success, so we thought we'd do it again. Please check out their website at worldartsmusic.com. That's worldartsmusic.com. And a special thanks to Dwight Wells over at World Arts for helping put this all together for us. We're very excited. So that will be September 4th, which is Monday, Labor Day. Please tune in for that. We will be right back with Phil DeLuca.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's EPPsproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Phil DeLuca. Hi, Phil, how are you?
Oh, great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I was very curious about your bio when I read your submission to the radio show. I wanted to have you on and talk to you about what it is exactly you do. Can you give us a quick background on yourself first, and then We will talk about your untalk therapy and what you're doing at this point.
Okay, well, I graduated in the mid 70s from postgraduate training in social work, clinical social work, and what I realized at the time was that the communication approaches, express yourself, be honest and open about how you feel, no secrets, get your anger off your chest, repressed anger is really bad, and always deal with the problem now, quote, never go to bed mad at each other. When I was doing this, and I call those the express yourself approaches, when I was doing this, the situation was getting worse. People were coming back, arguing even more. And I was just out of graduate school, and I figured I couldn't be screwing this up because I'm too new at this. I'm just following what the books tell me. So I started developing an alternative approach. And those express yourself approaches, by this point, have become kind of absorbed into the culture. Nobody even questions them. But when I started doing some research, I discovered that the science actually disproves that whole theory. The science of the brain, especially the latest science in the last 10 years, the brain and the body, the fight or flight response and neuroplasticity, they actually show that the worst thing you could possibly do when you're upset is talk about it. And so what I developed, I teach people how not to talk when they are upset. And that sound like a very simplistic thing, but can be a really difficult thing to get that message across, because that express yourself approach is pretty much settled science in a lot of people's mind and the culture. So that's what I teach people to do. And in response to that, I help people resolve problems that they're not getting with conventional approaches.
Well, you're right that don't go to bed angry and let's talk about it and get it off your chest. Those things are almost cliche when people are talking about their relationships with their wife or their husband or significant other. You're right. It's almost an unconscious sort of, we just say that. That's been
Yes.
drilled in. And what I'm reading from your bio is it sounds like you're taking just the opposite approach. So let's get into that for 1 second. If I have an argument with my spouse,
Yes.
Are you suggesting that we do in fact go to bed angry?
Well, better to be angry. See, what happens when we get upset is we say these things that you may not get over in hours, maybe days, maybe years. And usually when people argue before or try to fix it before they go to bed, they end up not going to bed anyway because they end up arguing all night. So, duh. So that approach doesn't work. And there's another part to this. So just let me give you a little brief piece of this.
Okay.
Let's look at the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is the body reacts to a perceived threat. And so we've got two parts to our brain as far as our information here that's relevant. We have our thinking brain, cerebral cortex, higher functioning, learning, music, spirituality, empathy. And then we have our survival brain, which is two little organs behind our ears, which we share with the lower life forms like the crocodiles. So we'll call that lizard brains. And what happens when the fight or flight response kicks in, the body perceives a threat, and it's really bad at perceiving real from imagined threats, big from small. So it always goes into a full fight mode. So we will react the same way to somebody taking our parking spot as if we're going to be eaten by a bear. So better safe than sorry. So it goes into this full combat mode. Blood reroutes from the front of our brain to the back of our brain, which becomes like the Hulk. And up to 70% of the blood to the front stops working, stops flowing. So if you've ever fallen asleep on a leg or an arm, I fell asleep on my arm a few weeks ago and I woke up and I had no blood flow. It was numb. It was a dead limb and I couldn't mentally move it. So I had to lift it up with my hand and move it, and then blood started flowing. And then I could access my arm because it had blood flow. Well, that's what happens with the body. Blood reroutes from the front brain to the back, and we can't access logic, rational thought, and our what's called survival brain, lizard brain hijack occurs, and it takes over our thinking. And people see this. If you observe, it's like if you've ever noticed the difference between your partner being calm versus upset, you see a whole different creature.
Oh, sure.
It's like an alien enters their body, and then they get calm, and the alien leaves again, and they're back to themselves. If you ever noticed that.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
And that's the two parts of the brain, because when this back brain, dark, bleak, paranoid, takes over, it through the autonomic nervous system, it connects to 90% of our organs. And so we get in this antagonistic, conflict-seeking mentality. So think about this. So let's imagine this. You're trying to talk to your partner. They're upset. You're calm, right? They can't access. We'll go back to our limb. It's the front part of their brain. There's no blood flow. And the back part of the brain is in control. So when you try to talk to them, be logical, all right? So what happens? They twist everything you say into a pretzel. Have you ever noticed that? Be honest and open. You know, it hurts me when you act like this. Well, they throw it up in your face. And the purpose of all of this is, this survival brain seeks conflict. It doesn't seek conflict resolution. That's the front part of our brain. So that's why everything we say, they twist and distort to pull us into conflict, because they have a different agenda. We all have a different agenda when we're in this survival brain versus a thinking brain. So what do the express yourself approaches say for the last 40 or 50 years? Try to talk your way through it. Well, the more you talk, the more frustrated you get. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered how the other party, when they're upset, knows exactly the buttons to push? And that's because when we get upset, our front brain, our back brain, accesses the information in our front brain and says, okay, what is it that makes them mad? And so we'll tell them this, give them this look, put this finger in their face, and when all else fails, bring up their mother. That'll make them crazy. So that's what we do. Have you ever noticed that when the person's upset, they bring up stuff, irrelevant stuff from 20 years ago? That's because the back brain takes snapshots, emotional snapshots that are always in the present when it gets activated. Front brain, thinking brain, knows time periods. Last year was last year. Next week is next week. Back brain, what happened 20 years when it gets activated, is right there. That's why when you have a conversation with them about something going on now, they'll flash back 15 years ago. That's the sign. That's that brain going off. So there's a lot of these changes that occur when we get upset. Okay, I'll tell you another thing. Have you ever noticed that when they're upset, everything, they take an oppositional stand? No matter what you say, they will disagree with it.
Right.
That's because even if they normally agree with it, but when they're upset, they're going to oppose, because that's one of the things this brain does. It takes an oppositional stance, an anti-stance. Have you ever noticed when somebody's upset, they have to be right, they have to win, they have to dominate? That's because survival brain, think about this. If survival's at stake, you can't be wrong one time, because you'll be somebody else's meal. So that's why we always have to win. We can't be wrong. If we're wrong, we're dead, according to this mentality.
Okay,
so there's a lot of... Go ahead.
Let me ask you something. Why does the survival brain seek conflict? What is the point of seeking conflict?
That's its purpose. It's only made for one purpose. There's a life-threatening event occurring. Your very life and limb is at risk. There was a neuroscientist who did, Dr. Paul McLean, did 30 years of autopsies on human and crocodile brains. And he said we share the same fight-or-flight mechanism that the crocodiles have. He called it our O brain because it's our most primitive acting brain. That's the survival brain we're talking about. He said, though, what we have is what they don't have, the most advanced frontal part of our brain. He called it our new brain. So we'll call it our genius or thinking brain. That's the way we're made. You've seen two cats circling each other with their fur up. That's what we have. That's how we get. our hair, as a matter of fact, one of the physiological changes that occur is hair on the back of our neck actually stands up when we get upset.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the survival brain, think about this. It has its place. You're about to be run over by a car, and the survival brain gets active in 1/1,000,000th of a second. So we instinctively take an anti-stance. The car is coming this way. I need super strength to jump out of the way, and I have to do it before I can think about it. So you jump out of the way. If we stayed in thinking brain, it'd be like, well, there's a car coming. I only got a fraction of a second to live. I could jump over here 10 feet, 15 feet. Too late. You've already been roadkill for 50 feet. Mm-hmm. So we need it. If you ever touched a hot pan and you pull it back real quick, that was survival brain. It already kicked in. So survival brain has its purpose. The problem is it's very bad at perceiving real from imagined threats. A lot of things will trigger it. Somebody took out the garbage again, or they didn't take out the garbage again. Somebody parked in my spot. Somebody didn't wash the car the right way. All these little things will set this brain off, and then it runs its course. Blood flows to this back brain. Our lens darkens, so now it affects mood. It becomes dark, bleak. Our attitude becomes provocative. Our thoughts get scrambled. It affects relationships. Now we're going to try to engage the other one in a conflict in order to preempt an attack that I know is imminent. So I'm going to preempt it and bait you into attacking back. That's why when you try to avoid, when they're upset and you try to avoid an argument, they won't let you leave. If you say, calm down, they scream at you, I am calm. And if you try to leave their presence, they'll follow you around. They'll follow you into the next room. If you close the door, they'll come in. If you lock the door, they'll pound on the door frequently. If you try to leave the house, they threaten you. If you leave, the locks will be changed and you'll be divorced. Don't come back. The question is, why are they trying so hard to keep you from escaping? Because according to that mindset that we all have in us, we're nothing but a meal to them. That's all. They just see us as a survival issue, and you want to make them a meal. Or if they're upset, they want to make you a meal. So they're just we're just doing what we're biologically programmed to do, if we allow that to control us. So if you ever had this internal dialogue when you were starting to get upset, part of you was saying, come on, act on it right now. Don't take that. You have rights. And then another little voice in your head said, no, stay calm. There's going to have real bad consequences. That's the two parts of the brain talking to each other. And then as stress keeps rising and the blood keeps getting rerouted from the front to the back brain, at some point you get to what's called lizard brain hijack, where the back brain takes over. And now people talk about how I just see words coming out of my mouth. There's nothing I can do to stop it. It's like a film of my life is unfolding and I'm helpless to stop it. That's lizard brain hijack, where the brain takes over, co-opts the body, sees the other party as someone out to harm them. So in a split second, we went from someone who's a loving partner to someone who is out to do us serious harm. And I need to protect myself from that. And so now they're in that's the alien that enters in at that point. And that's why when they get calmer and blood reroutes to the front part of the brain, the alien leaves. And now they're calm, rational, smiling, laughing. And then they get upset again and they flip back. The alien returns and the nice person's gone.
It's very funny because I'll just give you a quick example. My parents were exact opposites when it came to that kind of thing. My mother would fly off the handle in a second, but if, like you're saying, the front and the back of the brain, the blood for her would go to the back and come right back to the front again within, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. My father, on the other hand, was very, very long-tempered, and it would take a long time to get him upset. But when he was upset, it took him 3 or 4 days to come out of it.
Yes. People have different the blood reroutes to the front of the brain at different speeds with people. And a lot of that depends on how well they apply themselves to rerouting that blood. Because when it returns, which is normally our default setting in the front, you can tell people now have regrets, they have guilt, they have this preoccupation going around in their head, they have desires for revenge a lot of times. So there's a lot of costs to acting from this talking when we're in the survival brain. And, basically, communication gets increasingly chaotic. Sex becomes a battle over time. Sex becomes a battleground, a ritual, non-existent. We don't enjoy the other party's company as much. We start laughing at them rather than with them. So, and eventually they get into what I call the dead zone. You hadn't gotten over number 25 and you get hit with number 26. So recovery becomes increasingly incomplete. And it just sucks caring and love out of a relationship. And you get into what I call the dead zone. There's no caring left, so why bother fixing it? I have no desire to fix it. But actually, there's another part to this. See, when I was developing this approach, I started having health problems, premature memory loss and rheumatoid arthritis, which are stress-related. So I started doing research into health issues, and what I discovered, the very things that inflammation that causes those two conditions is the very process of the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is inflammation of the body. It's in flames. And like with flames, fire needs oxygen to continue on. It's a reciprocal. Fire is reciprocal. Well, our fight or flight response is reciprocal. It needs conflict back, oxygen back, in order for the flames of this conflict to continue. So when I started researching the health issues, I discovered the same mechanisms, inflammation, that causes marital and relationship strife and conflict and anger outbursts is the very thing that causes inflammation in the body. And then I discovered we're in a feedback loop that is self-reinforcing and escalating. Stress hits, we communicate in a dark way, provoking way. We now as a couple get along more poorly. I feel worse, more stress. I hadn't slept, I have a stomach ache, a headache. More stress chemicals are released. I go more into this survival brain, so my lens is more distorted. So when I talk to you, it's in a more provocative way, which means we get along worse. There's more, I feel, it feeds back onto me. So people end up in this negative feedback loop in which, after a while, no matter what they do, it leads to conflict. If we talk about it, we get into it. And if we don't talk about it, we still get into an argument. So we end up in a lose-lose situation.
Is that what you're referring to as the dead zone?
Yes, the dead zone is, I'll give you an example, the best example of the dead zone. So I'm seeing this couple, and he's clearly dragging in the wife. She didn't want to be there. And she said, why bother? You make these promises, you never follow through, so I don't believe you anymore. And he said, but it's different this time, honey. I hadn't had a drink in 6 months, no women. And he went through this long list of all the changes he made. And I was thinking to myself, man, I think he's got it this time. And she said, you know, honey, I'm happy for you. I think you got it this time. And in your next relationship, you'll make a much better husband. Dead zone. That's the place you don't want to go. Because once you get there, like that woman, it doesn't matter what you change. It's irrelevant.
So it's time for divorce at that point, yeah? Yes,
it's breakup time, or people then live as, quote, friends. We're roommates. We're not partners. We're roommates. We're business partners. And so they have this cold relationship where there's all these elephants in the room, but nobody will talk about them because every time they do, just these explosions occur. So they keep going, bouncing off this wall and bouncing off this wall. It's a very bad place to be.
Sounds like
very
it.
Bad.
Oh, I just was thinking that if my relationship ever got to that point, I wouldn't want to be there at all. I would just leave.
Yes, and that's what people do.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like. Now, can you salvage anybody from the dead zone or not?
If they're truly in the dead zone, no.
No.
But a lot of times there's embers under there. And like any embers, if you can clear off the big logs and put small little tinder on it and blow, you can eventually get a roaring flame. So if they're truly in the dead zone, no. But a lot of times it looks like they are, and they are not. Those are the ones you can help. See, and one of the things I realized is that people are not going to resolve any issues as long as there's this high conflict going on. And by the way, we're using loud, long, drawn-out arguments as an example, but they don't have to be that way. They could be quick stealthies. I give you the eye, the look. You give me the evil eye back. Took 1/10 of 1 second, but the whole sequence has occurred. I don't like you as much after this look as you did before. I don't want to go to dinner with you now because you looked at me like I was Satan incarnate. Why would I want to be around you? So these things can happen very quickly, and then it gets confusing. They go underground, these battles. And then it gets real confusing because then it's like, I don't know what happened. We were having a nice conversation. Next thing I know, we've been mad at each other for 2 weeks. Where did that come from? That's where it came from. So one of the things I realized is when you have high conflict, you can't get to any issues, money, children, in-laws, because every time you approach the issue, you have all of these bombs going off. And it sucks caring out of the relationship. And a lot of times people don't have much caring left. So you got to get them. As a therapist, I have to end that conflict immediately, like in that session. I want them walking out of there in a different place so that the conflict ends right there, or at least cools, so that so there's no more caring loss. Because every time you go through this, a little more caring gets sucked out. And you never know if the next argument may be the one that breaks it. So I developed an approach that stops the argument right there and puts them on a better track. And that's why I call it untalk, because I teach them how and why not to talk while they're upset and give them an alternative that works. Where talking, actually, according to the science, is the worst way to get through to survival brain. That will provoke a reaction back like no other. And so what have we been doing for 40 years? Talk it through. Yeah. Tell them what you think. Come up with rules. So they come up with these rules. Well, the next time we're upset, now they're talking about this in their frontal brain. The next time we're upset, we promise not to bring up toxic words, stay in the present, don't point fingers, right? So you go to your car, you have an argument right out of the therapist's office, and what do? You get upset. Survival brain kicks in, and you do the very things you promise not to do. Why? Because you can't access that information. It's in your front brain, which is now comatose. It's only got 25% blood flow. You can't use it. It's like that dead limb you're carrying around on your leg when you fall asleep. And so now when the other person says, hey, we promised not to bring up this, don't say this, and you're doing this, don't tell me what to do. I'll show you what being mad is. So now the conventional approaches cause and add to the very problem they're trying to solve.
Okay, is it possible to actually control the survival brain? Because it seems to me the survival brain is like a hair trigger. It's there for a purpose, like you said. If you jump out and stand in front of a car that's coming at you, it sort of runs on automatic, right?
It can, yes.
It can, okay.
Yes.
So you're suggesting that we can control when it goes off and when it doesn't?
Oh, yes. That's what I do. I've helped thousands of couples do that.
All right. So give me a little example, just a quick one, of when, you kind of feel when that argument is coming, something happens and you like you said, the evil eye thing. Okay. You're at that point and you know that if you say one more word, it's going to blow up.
That's right.
Okay. So where do you go from there? What do you do?
All right. Argument starts two ways. We go into survival brain and provoke them, right? Or they go in and they pull us in. And no matter how hard we try it, they're going to pull us in, right?
Right. Right.
So let's deal with the first one first.
Okay.
Because this is a skill. I call it untalk and untherapy. I teach people a skill, and in the process of teaching them the skill, they get along better, they control themselves more, they fall back in love, and so it's therapeutic. Falling in love and not arguing anymore is therapeutic. It just lowers the inflammation in our body, and now our health gets better, our love's improved. So I call it untherapy and untalk and untherapy for a specific reason, because that's what I do. I teach people how to undo what is settled, quote, settled science now about talking when you're angry. And if you don't, you're not being true to yourself, and you're denying your own personhood. That's crazy. If that's true, then why, when you get calmer, do you feel guilty, ashamed, and similar kind of feelings?
Right.
Which one is the true you? That person or the other one when you were acting? And one of the things I've noticed is that when people get into this survival brain, everybody says the same thing about it. There's something degrading. I mean, people call it my animal brain, my dark brain, my evil brain, my monster brain. Why do we give it names like that? Because there's something degrading about when we act from that brain out of control. It's like, we're not an animal. Animals are supposed to act like that. I'm a human being, and human beings do not act that out of control. So there's something degrading about acting from that place. But let's get back to the question you asked. So what do we do about it? Well, let's start with the first one. When you get into survival brain, the other party's minding their own business. And now the blood's rerouted, your lens is darkened, and you're going to try to provoke an argument. So what I teach people to do is, you need a sign, an alarm going off. Your body is telling you that the blood is rerouting from your front to the back. Your heart's pumping harder, your blood pressure's rising, your palms is getting sweaty. So I asked them, what is the one sign that your body is telling you that its survival brain's kicking in? Take a minute and look back on past arguments. And so they'll tell me, well, I can feel my chest pounding. Where? Right above my heart. Okay, that's your sign. It doesn't change throughout life. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. The next time that happens, rather than saying anything, I want you to get away and go into another room. I'm going to teach you self-control. I'm going to teach you a skill. So go into the other room. Now I want you to close the door. You either have to close the door or get out of the house. Why? Because you've got to let this survival brain know to stand down. And as long as it's around the other party, let's say in the same room, it's on high alert because it thinks it's about to be eaten by this person. So you go to the other room, you close the door, and that puts a barrier there that allows this brain to start detoxing. And now you have to drain this off. You have to reroute the blood from the back of the brain to the front. What does that? Well, science tells us real clearly what does that. Exercise is real important. Just going for a walk. Why? Because these chemicals are in our body. They're made for movement, fight or flight. They're not made for sitting there stewing. Separate from that, there are other things. Science says music calms it down. It's like all of these things I'm about to tell you is like throwing cold water on gasoline, okay? Calming music, comedy, connecting with people, but not that person you're mad at. Here's a tough one, but works really well. Write down things that you appreciate, called a gratitude, appreciation about the other party. And this is really tough to do, but certainly they did something good in their life. Well, he did help me to change the diaper one time, whatever it is. And what you're doing is, with all of these exercises, you're forcing, if you have a prayer life, that's a great time to do it. Reading a hard-covered book, research has shown that is one of the highest ways to lower that stress chemicals. And what you're doing is, see, there's two parts to our brain. There's the fight or flight response, the back brain, But there's the front part of the brain, and that is called the rest and digest. It's connected to the same organs that the back brain is, through the vagus nerve, which is called the wandering nerve, Latin for wandering, and it connects like it snakes through the whole body. So the body has an override, has a calming switch. The feel-good chemicals lower the stress hormones. So grab your dog and hug your dog. Caressing does it. Music, exercise, all those things we talked about. There's 20 different things I use with people. Deep breathing, that does it because of the various mechanisms that are involved. So you get calmer, and now you go back out with the other party. 80% of the time, it's like, that wasn't even an issue. It's not worth getting upset about. The other 20%, you can talk through with your frontal brain. We know how to communicate in frontal brain. Don't use toxic words. Don't be obnoxious. Don't get in their face, etc. The problem is we can't do that. We can't access that information when we're in our survival brain because that part of the brain is unconscious, the front, that knows all that. So think of the limb. Go back to that analogy I used. Think of the limb the last time you fell asleep on your leg. You couldn't move the leg. You had to drag it along. And you could only move it when the blood flow returned.
Right.
That's exactly what happens to the brain and the body when we get upset. And the more we get into that brain, the more blood flow we lose. So get calmer and then get back around the other party. Now what happens is people in a relatively short period of time, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, can actually then be around the other party and not lose it. Stay in their self-control. Have their front brain override their back brain without the back brain overriding the front. The other situation is, which is a two-step maneuver. Now, let me ask you a question, if this sounds familiar. So here's your situation, and this is where conventional approaches trap people, push people into no-win situations. You're minding your own business. You're having a great day. You open the door, and you're like, and the other party is in survival brain. How do you know? They're giving you the snake eye, as it's been called. They're bringing up certain topics are toxic. They're quiet, suddenly quiet. Or you could just feel it. It's in the air.
Yeah.
So now your front brain says, Houston, we got a problem. Right. Because I know what's going to happen. Yeah. They're going to want to talk to get it out. But I know from past experience, like 3000, for instance, that every time they talk about it, everything I say, they're just going to twist it around to get into an argument. Does that sound familiar?
Very familiar. I can give you examples.
Yeah. Who can't?
Right.
Why? Because survival brain, you have two different goals. Front brain is conflict resolving. Back brain is conflict seeking. So that's why when you try to talk through it, they twist it into pretzels and bring up stuff that's irrelevant in ways that hurts you. So they're trying to pull you into conflict. Now, here's your dilemma. If you talk, you figure, well, if I say anything, we're going to get into it. And if I don't say anything, they're going to escalate and persist until we get into an argument anyway.
Right.
So true. And I feel guilty because I'm running from the problem. So if I speak about it, there's a problem. If I don't speak about it and go to bed mad, I'm running from the problem and making it worse. So I lose all around. Does any of that sound familiar?
Yeah, very familiar. The one thing I wanted to say that I found interesting about the dynamic of the front and the back brain is how quickly people can switch it on and off. I had an argument at one point, and we were right in the middle of it. Both of us were in that survival mode. The phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and it was somebody, I can't even remember who it was now, but obviously I had no issue with that person. So I had to quickly kind of come on and be nice.
oh, hello.
Oh, hello.
Yes.
How are you? Long time no hear from you. What are you doing? Just like in an instant. And I thought that now I'm thinking about that
Yes.
going, so did that mean that the blood flowed right back to the front that fast just to pick up the phone?
You left a little piece. Frequently, then you put the phone down and you turn back on the other party and it flows back into the back brain.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
My mother used to do that. She was real good at it. And as a kid, I didn't know why. Now I know why.
But it seems like there's a point to this where if you're able to do that, then that is a bit of a control of being able
Yes.
to route the blood from the front to the back and the back to the front very quickly, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so that answers the question you asked before.
Right.
Can we control it? Well, right there we can control it. We also frequently don't do it in public. We're mad at our partner in a restaurant or at an affair, and then we go and everything's calm.
Right.
And then we go home and we
And it
let
blows
it
up.
out.
Yeah.
So
Wait till we get home. We're going to have this out, and then you
That's
get in the
right.
car and it's silent all the way home. And then, yeah. Okay.
yeah, that's the way it works. So we do have some control over it if there's witnesses, if we're in public. But some people, it doesn't matter where they're at. They're just going to let it out. They're going to vomit on everybody and everything. Because that's what it is. It's just emotional and verbal vomit.
And
That's
I
all.
guess there's levels of that survival where it goes anything from an argument to somebody actually murdering somebody.
Yeah, I call it low, moderate, high, and then extreme, where we lose it. People black out. The next day, there's holes in the wall. There's broken glasses,
Yeah.
and they don't have a clue. I don't remember any of it and that's one of the characteristics of this survival brain. It's so focused on the other party. Senses become acute. We lose peripheral vision and hearing, and we have tunnel vision and hearing. So we're just focused on the predator right there who wants to pull us into the lagoon, spin us around a few times, and stuff us under a log for a better meal. So we're focused intensely on them. So that's why we're blaming. That's why we have low or no self-awareness. And that's why when people get upset and you talk to them about it later and say, did you know you said this? I never said that. I never heard that, because our hearing becomes very selective and our awareness drops down to very low. So getting back to what you're talking about, in the low range, when it's just kind of nipping at our front brain and there's somewhat of balance, but we occasionally lose it, we can see ourselves, observe ourselves being sarcastic or short or testy, and feel bad about it and pull it back in, and then it'll pop out again. You see that internal struggle, that tug of war going on between the two of them? I'm frequently like that when I don't get enough sleep. Because sleep's one of the mechanisms that's high stress on the body and sets in motion all of this inflammation process. But as you get up on that ladder, you're not able to restrain it, and you put it out. You may be observing it, but you can't stop it. And then you get further up, and now you don't see anything of what you're doing, and you remember nothing of it. So yes, there are different levels, and that's why people give it different handles. Bad brain, stupid brain, back brain, monster brain, primitive brain. Those are all different levels that, when I talk to people through the years, they've described what was going on inside of them. It's a good observation.
Do you think that some people I know I'm going a little off topic, but I'm kind of curious. People that were convicted of, say, serial killers, or was there something more going on there with them?
Yeah, serial killers tend to be sociopathic, and that's a
whole different ball game.
Yeah, they don't have a conscience. Yeah, they don't come back. There's no frontal brain. As a matter of fact, science shows there's no, the part of the brain that has conscience and value system, it's shrunk down. There's like nothing there very much.
Oh, so they're just on back brain all the time, basically.
Yes, they don't have conscience. They don't have guilt. They don't have the cerebral cortex, the front part of the brain, fully developed. It's like a dwarf kind of membrane.
Well, that makes sense. So for the average person, the average non-serial killer, who is just in a relationship and they get into an argument.
Yeah.
And they get into an argument.
Yeah.
Like we said, we talked about the levels. I mean, there have been people that they always call it, I was pushed over the edge.
Yes.
And they ended up killing their partner. So what was that? That was where it went to the back brain so extremely that they just went and lost control, basically?
Yes, and, crimes of wrath.
Crimes of passion yeah.
Crimes of
Right.
passion, I guess, crimes of passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. It pushes us back. And, I was talking to a man the other day who's, he came in after I've seen him a few months, and he said, this past Friday, I went to a place I never thought I could go. I don't remember any of it. I'm totally blacked out. He said it was so scary. And I know that because my wife threatened to move out. She hadn't talked to me, and she may never talk to me again. I don't know what happened. I've never been there before. But I had stress, loss of sleep. Of course, he also had some alcohol, which lowers the front brain, and the barrier there activates the back part of our brain, and it lowers our front defenses. So a lot of people, if I can even get them off of alcohol while they're in counseling, a lot of that will go away. A lot of the conflict will go away because they only lose control and say these ugly things or in a bad mood or provocative attitude when they are on alcohol. So that's one of the first conditions. If alcohol use is excessive, this approach won't work because you don't have the self-control.
It's interesting about alcohol and how it affects people differently, because there are people who drink, and I call them the I love you drunk. You've been in a bar where these guys have a few drinks and they're hugging everybody and, oh, I love you, man. Oh, I love you. And they're getting all like that. And then you've got these other guys who are quiet, who are nice, who are docile people. They get a few drinks and they want to fight everybody.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And
that alien is a fight alien.
Yeah, and it's always been fascinating to me how one particular drug can affect people so differently, and yet it's still legal. I'm not suggesting we make it illegal, but it's just, if they had to pick one to legalize, that was the wrong one to legalize. Because the results of dosage is so varied between person to person. If you give somebody a painkiller, it pretty much is going to work consistently across everybody. But you give people alcohol and the reactions are going to be from one end to the other. I always thought that was very interesting. Now, let me just go back to what you said. You said that when people drink, the front brain, what happens now?
Well, the front brain gets weakened. And the back brain, yes, the back brain gets a lot more emboldened. And, the ability to control it gets significantly weakened. You lose the willpower to say, don't say that. It's like, who cares? I'm going to say it.
Oh,
so
all right. Okay.
That's what happens. So, and when we're in this fight or flight response, let me give you a really good example, if I could.
Sure.
So we're gonna use this little role playing here. So I have this piece of paper in front of me, this white piece of paper. Okay, so imagine this, and I'm upset. So I'm going to put on these sunglasses. All right, that represents my survival, my lizard brain perception, dark, bleak, distorted. Okay? So now I look at this piece of paper and I say, well, Doug, what's the problem here? I'm on a schedule. I'm out of copier paper. I asked you to get copier paper. And what do you bring back? You bring back green copier paper. I can't submit this to my boss. He'll fire me. What the hell's wrong with you? And so what do you say back? Now you're in your thinking brain and you're seeing things in a clear lens. So what do you say back to me about this paper?
Well, I would probably say, geez, I'm sorry. And I would go get the correct paper.
Well, actually, though, it is white. So you're seeing white. See, I have my lens on.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So what you would say back probably is, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So you're looking at this white piece of paper in frontal brain, so your lens is clear and you're seeing things accurately. And you say, paper is white.
Okay.
And I'm saying, looking at it through my green lens, this is green. So what do you think? I'm stupid or a fool? Now remember, this brain is darkly paranoid and suspicious. So you're just giving me more ammo to confirm what I believe, that you're out to harm me. Because only someone is out to harm me. Only someone who lies and thinks I'm a fool is out to harm me. So the more you can try to convince me this is white, the more I'm going to see this. I'm going to get more hostile, and I'm going to be more insistent and defend this. You mean to tell me that you mean to tell me that this green piece of paper is white? That's something. What do you think? I'm a fool or stupid? That's something like your mother would say. Now there's an idiot for you. Okay. So now I've changed the direction because I know this bothers you. So I bring it up. You now start getting upset. So we're going to give you purple glasses. All right. So you're seeing things through a purple lens. I'm seeing things through a green lens. And so I say, so let me ask you one more time. Do you really think this paper here is white? So what do you say back?
No, it's purple now.
Purple?
It's purple.
Before it's white? Now it's purple. You can't make up your mind. You're a bigger idiot than I am. Right? So now we're arguing over this paper that we're both wrong on, but we believe we're right on. And then we pull apart, we get calmer. Our blood gets rerouted to our front brain, our normal default setting. Our lens changes, and now we look at this piece of paper and are like, oh, it is white. I feel so ashamed. I'm so embarrassed. I feel so bad. That's exactly what happens when we get into the survival brain. They're seeing things in a radically different way. And so when you try to talk your way through it, all you're doing is pushing them further into it. And what have the approaches of the last 50 years said? Talk about it. Always talk about it. The science shows that that's the worst possible way to get through this survival brain. There's a lot of other better ways. Touch. If you touch a person, caress them in a nice way. That activates the front part of the brain to release those feel-good chemicals. A while ago, I was working on I'm doing a book about this, and I was working on a manuscript. I got up early, and somehow I lost everything on there after working 2 hours. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't save it. What am I going to do? I got to go to the office now. I said, come here, honey. So I called my wife. Oh, you're good with this stuff. So she was asking me questions, and I was getting more upset. Did you do this? Did you do? Yes. And then she suddenly stopped, came over, and reached on my head, and she stroked my head, kissed it, and said, honey, I love you, and walked away. That deflated that brain. I was just like a balloon got punctured. And afterwards, I went over, I said, honey, that was the best thing you could have done. She said, what? I didn't do anything. No, when you caressed my head and kissed me, that helped me more than anything you were saying. Because the science behind that says this vagus nerve that weaves through our body is connected in the back on the spinal column. The back brain connects to it, and the front in two different places. But when you activate that nerve in a nice way, like a caress or a nice word or nice calming music or a hug, that stimulates the front part of that vagus nerve in the brain. And then that transmits all the way down to the rest of the body. So talking is the worst thing. And I call my approach communication of the 21st century, because science says, hey, here's the right way and the wrong way to do it. We've been doing it the wrong way. So why not work with the body rather than working against it?
It's interesting because when you're in that back brain and the other person is in the back brain, it seems like the last thing you want to do is hug them.
Yes.
You might want to hit them.
And a lot of people won't let you. They'll take a swing at you.
Right,
if you
exactly.
do, you better duck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say you have to know your enemy. And I know that's kind of harsh, but when we're in the survival brain, the other party is our enemy. They want to make a meal of us.
Right. You don't want to hug them.
Well, some you can get away with. A lot of times you can't. When my wife gets upset, sometimes I'll put on calming music, and that calms her down. So there's a lot of different things you can do. A lot of times you just got to leave them alone, let them cool off, and then re-engage and talk about it. But here's the dilemma you have, going back to our earlier example. If we talk about it, they get into it. And if we don't talk about it, they escalate and we get into it anyway. Right? Remember that?
Yeah.
Very too common scenario. So what I tell people is, well, when they're trying to provoke you, and you've used all the means to talk your way through it, and it seems to be getting worse, you have to disengage. You have to leave. Now, the problem is they will escalate. So I will say to them, so can you go into another room? And they'll say yes, but the other party will follow. 5% will say yes, they won't follow me. Another 5% will say no, they'll follow me. Can you close the door? Another 5% will say yes, that'll work. The other 5% will say no, they'll come in. Can you lock the door? Another 5% will say that'll work. The other 85% will say no, that won't work. Why? Because they'll break the door down. They'll get in the car, ram it through the wall, and while I'm pinned in the rubble, they'll finish the argument. Slight exaggeration, but it gives you the flavor. People, when we get into the survival brain, a lot of times when the other party tries to disengage, let's look at it through our survival lens. When the prey tries to escape, they try to lure them back, or they chase them. That's why they're following you.
Right.
So you have to factor that in. The reason they're escalating is because you're, quote, winning. You're cutting them off from their fix. The science says that when this fight or flight response kicks in, adrenaline is one of the substances. That's a strong drug inside our body. And when we're in this chronic fight or flight conflict state, we get addicted to this adrenaline. That's why people will provoke arguments, quote, for no reason, because they're going through adrenaline withdrawal, and their body is promoting a fight in order to get their high, their fix. So that's why they don't want you escaping, because you're cutting them off from their fix. And actually, if you engage them in conflict, if you think about this, we're actually becoming enablers, because we're allowing them to stay intoxicated on these toxic chemicals, in that case, adrenaline.
Phil, we have got to wrap this up. We have run to the end. What is the name of your book?
Well, it's not. I'm writing a manuscript and submitting it to an agent, but I have on my site, Let's Talk More Love, a dead zone quiz. Okay. So if people want to see where they're at, just take the quiz. And then I'm going to be setting up very shortly a free webinar for about 45 minutes or so, in which I'm going to go into detail about the things we're talking about. I'm going to have a lot of funny stuff on. I'm going to wear a lizard mask. I'm going to have all this funny stuff on, and then show them what to do when they're stuck in that. So if they go on and they go on my website and sign up for that, it'll probably be ready in a few weeks, and they'll get a free lesson in that, free therapy session.
Okay, and your website is, tell us the website.
Let's Talk More Love.
Let'sTalkMoreLove.com.
Yes, and there's another site, Let's Talk More Love /BrainCore/. So that's another link.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming on. We ran very long, but it was really, really interesting. I learned a couple of things from you today that I'm going to try the next time I get into that back brain mode with my partner. So thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Phil DeLuca. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.